During the late 90s, as the Attitude Era was in full effect and the company at the time, World Wrestling Federation was reaching new heights in pop culture with a lot of its superstars bringing a lot of attention to the product. There will be also the same thing going on with the company's tag team division. You had tag teams like the Acolytes, Too Cool, New Age Outlaws, but three teams you automatically think of when it comes to the tag team division during that time are the Hardy Boys, the Dudley Boys, and Edge and Christian. As Dudley was having their feud with the Acolytes, the Hardys, along with Edge and Christian, was having their feud as well. But it would be in October of 1999 at the No Mercy pay-per-view where the Hardys, Edge and Christian, would compete in the first ever tag team ladder match. This was the match that put awareness to the newer and younger tag team talent that was on the company's roster. Heading into the new millennium, things will go all the way up from there, especially for Edge and Christian, because the two Canadians would achieve something that I don't think they even realized or even thought that would happen. From their first title reign to their last, this team will end up winning the tag team titles 7 times within the calendar year. So in this video, we're going to break it down on all 7 of their reigns and how they came about and where I place them as far as in the history of, the greatest tag teams. The two kayfabe brothers will make their debuts in the company separately. First, Edge will make his on June 22nd on 1998 episode of Raw, and Christian will make his debut at September 27th, 1998 at the Breakdown in Your House pay-per-view, where he would end up costing Edge a match against Owen Hart as a mysterious newcomer. He would later make his official in-ring debut at Judgment Day 1998 on October 18th, winning the WWF Light Heavyweight Championship from Tonka Michinoku. They would end up forming the 3-man group with Gangrel called The Brood, and at the tail end of 98 and the beginning of 99, they would feud against the Ministry of Darkness. But on February 1st, the episode of Raw, they will be revealed as the new followers of the Ministry of Darkness. And by April of that same year, the Brood will end up separating from the Ministry of Darkness. And then by July of that same year, Edge and Christian will end up breaking away from Gangrel, turning into baby faces and feuding with him. Gangrel will end up forming the new Brood along with the Hardy Boys. But the night after the No Mercy pay-per-view in 99 on October 18th on an episode of Raw, the new Brood, as far as with the Hardys, they will end up attacking Gangrel, and that ended that trio. So Edge and Christian were on their own, and the Hardys were on their own. Edge and Christian will end up, going through a lot of tag matches for the rest of the year, and their last pay-per-view appearance will be at the Survivor Series of that year, where they will be a part of the traditional Survivor Series 8-man tag elimination match, and they will be a part of that team with the Hardys, and they will end up losing that match against the Holly Cousins, Hardcore and Crash, and Too Cool. Now, heading into the year 2000, both Edge and Christian will be a part of the 30-man Royal Rumble match, which took place on January 23rd at the famous Madison Square Garden Arena. The next pay-per-view, which will be the No Way Out pay-per-view, which took place on February 27th, Edge and Christian will face the Hardy Boys once again, and this is when they will determine who will be the number 1 contenders for the tag team titles, which the Dudley Boys will end up winning the tag titles earlier that night at that same pay-per-view. On March 16th, on the episode of SmackDown, Edge and Christian will end up exercising that number 1 contendership against the Dudley Boys, but they would not come up with a victory for that one. And on the following episode of Raw, on March 20th, they will end up in a tag team tournament that will take place. And the last 2 teams who will make the finals to determine the number 1 contenders for the tag titles for the WrestleMania 2000 pay-per-view, it will be Edge and Christian and the Hardy Boys, which the match will end up ending in a no contest. And that same night, this is when Vince McMahon would make a decision to make the first ever triangle ladder match for the tag team championships, which involved the Hardy Boys, Edge and Christian, and the Dudleys. WrestleMania 2000 would take place in Anaheim, California. Now at this time, the arena was called the Arrowhead Pond, but now we know it now as the Honda Center. Now, WrestleMania 2000 wasn't the worst and it wasn't the best, but it was a step up from the previous year and the company was more popular than them. But this triangle ladder match will always win the award for the best match of the night. It took the cake, and after all the high flying action that took place in doing this match, Edge and Christian will end up coming out as the victors at the end of this match, and this would be their first time, their first reign as the WWF Tag Team Champions. Now, before we get into the rest of the breakdown of their title reigns, I like to bring up the fact that before the first title reign, Edge and Christian were viewed as Mystique baby faces. Of course, when they come out, they would get cheers and things like that, but they didn't do much talking. They didn't do a lot of promos at the time, and they was always entering the ring through the crowd. But slowly, after they became champions, this is when they would start to get into their heel bags, but also into their own characters. Far as the 5-second poses, trolling the crowd, and things like that. Which, it added a lot of value to their characters. And it brought a lot of heat to them, which is a good thing when they're coming wrestling. Now, their first title reign only lasted for 57 days, from April 2nd, 2000 to May 29th, 2000. And they would end up dropping the tag team titles to Too Cool on the episode of Raw due to interference from Kid Rock's hype man at the time, Joe C. Rest in peace. Now, their second title reign will begin a month later at the King of the Ring, where they will end up competing in a fatal 4-way tag team elimination match, which also included TNA, the Hardys, and then the champions at the time, Too Cool. Now, after TNA and the Hardys were eliminated, it only left ENC and Too Cool, and of course, the heel cheating faction, that ENC will, started to become known for, they would end up defeating Too Cool, and this is when they would end up becoming a 2-time tag team champions. Now, their second reign as tag team champions only lasted for 91 days. And after the King of the Ring, they would defend the titles against the Acolytes at the Fully Loaded pay-per-view. And then the next pay-per-view after that would end up being SummerSlam, which they would end up competing in the first ever TLC match with the Hardys and the Dudley Boyz, and they would end up, putting on a classic match as usual, but they would still retain the titles. Now, next month after that pay-per-view will be the Unforgiven pay-per-view, where they would end up dropping the tag titles to the Hardy Boyz in the Steel Cage match. Now, that match, it was freaking awesome. I still go back and look at that match to this day. Now, at the time, Mick Foley was the commissioner, and he told ENC that long as the Hardys were champions, they couldn't get any more title shots. So they would end up getting their last title shot against the Hardys the night after the Unforgiven pay-per-view in a tag team ladder match for the tag titles. And, Edge and Christian, they lost. Now, after this is when they would start becoming desperate for title shots. And this is when they would start to do the whole Los Conquistadors. This was funny back then, and looking back at it now, it's still funny as hell. And they would end up, defeating the Hardys at the No Mercy 2000 pay-per-view, which ended up beginning their third title reign. But they would end up losing the titles 24 hours later to the Hardys because, ENC, they had some guys pretending to be the Los Conquistadors when they weren't in the suits. And they end up getting tricked because they end up getting exposed for, dressing up like the Conquistadors when they weren't supposed to or anything like that. So Mick Foley, he let them have that third title reign. But next thing you know, the Hardys end up being the Los Conquistadors, and that's how they end up defeating them. And so the Hardys end up getting back the titles that next night. Now, the Hardys will end up losing the tag titles to the RTC, Right to Censor, on November 6, 2000 on an episode of Raw. And you fast forward to December 10th, 2000, which will end up being the Armageddon pay-per-view. Edge and Christian will end up winning the tag titles for the fourth time in a 4-way tag team match against the RTC, the Dudley Boyz, and K-Quick and Road Dogg. Now, this reign will only last for 8 days because on December 18th on the episode of Raw, they will end up dropping the tag titles to The Rock and Undertaker, out of all people. But 3 days later, on the episode of SmackDown, they will end up winning the titles for a fifth time against The Rock and Undertaker due to Kurt Angle being a special guest referee and helping them cheat. Now, their fifth reign will only last a month because, going into the 2001 Royal Rumble pay-per-view, they would end up dropping the tag titles to the Dudley Boyz, which actually that match was pretty good too. They was good about that, as far as, Edge and Christian versus the Hardys versus Dudley. Like they always been good at putting them matches against each other. Now at this point, they really starting to play hot potato with the tag team titles at this point, because their sixth reign would end up being when they would defeat the Hardy Boyz on the episode of Raw on March 19, 2001, but they would end up losing the titles the same night an hour later against the Dudley Boyz. Like, man. Now, basically, at the tail end, we're almost at the tail end as far as the reigns. Now, their last title reign, their seventh and final title reign, will end up being at WrestleMania 17. When I bring up WrestleMania 17, I don't have to say much about it. TLC 2, just WrestleMania 17 period was the perfect pay-per-view. I think that was like the height of the Attitude Era. Everything. I mean, the whole entire pay-per-view. Even the gimmick battle royal. But TLC 2, that's all I have to say. I still remember watching TLC 2 as a child on live pay-per-view. I still remember that. And with this TLC 2 match, they would end up setting the bar very, very high for the tag team division. And I don't think it will ever see anything like that ever again as far as with the tag team division. Now, with the help of Rhino, who was new to the company at the time because due to ECW folk, he would end up helping them win the tag titles for the second time. And this reign will only last for 18 days because on April 19, 2001, on the episode of SmackDown, they will end up dropping the tag titles to the Brothers of Destruction, aka Kane and Undertaker. Man. And after that, we will never ever see Edge and Christian as tag team champions ever again. So that's crazy that, I never really thought about that until now. It's like, man, they really pushed them far as, as like the ultimate tag team. 7 times in one calendar year. 7 times. Now I know a lot of people are like, well, they didn't keep them very long. It's like they was like short reigns or anything like that, which, is understandable. People are going to have their complaints. But, I feel like it was very impressive if you ask me. And then growing up, for me, I wasn't the biggest Edge and Christian fans. I was always a Hardy Boyz fan. But as an adult now, I look back at it, they did a great job as far as their character developments, being heels, trolling the crowd, and, just cheating tactics and being desperate, doing anything to keep the titles and get the titles, looking back at it. Because you already know later on, after they would lose the tag team titles, this is when they would start, pushing Edge more and things like that, because he would end up winning the King of the Ring of that year. So, and then, they would end up breaking up and splitting up, and, the rest is history. Both individuals will go on their individual paths as far as on solo success. But, looking back at it, Edge and Christian, I do look at them as, as one of the GOATs when it comes to the tag team division. Although they weren't together very long, but in the short amount of time that they were a tag team, they did a lot as far as not only with their title reigns, but also as far as the tag team division. The same with the Dudleys, the same with the Hardy Boyz. They definitely did something, they did set a precedent, for the WWE tag team division at that time. So, but y'all let me know what y'all think as far as this 7-time title reign that they had in 1 year. Man, let me know. Like, what was your favorite Edge and Christian match? What was your favorite Edge and Christian moment? What do you place Edge and Christian as far as, on your list of greatest tag teams of all time? just let me know. Hope you all enjoyed this video. This is my very first video here on the Turnbuckle City channel. Hoping I can, keep it going, keep it consistent with this content as far as, more great wrestling content. Don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to let people know that Turnbuckle City is the channel to tune in to. I'm your boy Mouse, and I'm out. Love you.